What's up, guys? This is Lucid Rain, and today we're going to talk about the Black Shuck in our Cryptid Central series, where we talk about, well, cryptids and sometimes urban legends. So today we're doing the Black Shuck, which is basically the most known Hellhound.
Yeah, Hellhound, Ghost Dog, Black Dog.
Yeah, it's like
they're all kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of different variation. So this is more an urban legend than a cryptid per se.
Yeah, it's kind of both.
So we may do a separate video on black dogs / hellhounds. I guess we'll just have to see how this one goes.
Yeah.
So
we'll see. So the Black Shuck is mostly located in eastern England. That's where I've seen like most of its activity being documented. I don't know if it's in other parts of the world. If it is, I haven't seen it. So it's basically like a classic hellhound that you hear. It's it's black shaggy fur, red eyes. Basically, it's unmistakable for a normal dog because of the eyes and its size. Like apparently the thing is like huge, like bigger than the biggest dog, and apparently it moves like it doesn't make noise when it moves, like which kind of like it's silent, which kind of gives credence to it being a ghostly entity.
Yeah, so I think like it's kind of hard to differentiate whether it's like a black wolf or if it is a dog. I mean, I don't really know like what you would argue the differences are.
Yeah, I honestly don't know the exact differences besides the fact that wolves are bigger than dogs, but they say the Black Shuck is a dog. But I don't know if it's actually a dog or a wolf. It's kind of irrelevant anyway.
Yeah, it has piercing red eyes. I don't know if you mentioned that or not.
Yeah, I said that.
So yeah, it's a pretty old legend. It dates back to I believe 1577.
Yeah, it's very old.
The first experience with it in this specific format. I'm not sure if black dogs were ever seen previous to that. I don't know. Have that information off top.
There's no way we'd know, really. They say like that what they initially thought about what this thing was that it was guarding the entrance to like hell or the underworld or the world of the dead or whatever you want to call it. That's what a lot of people like, that's what was going around when they first saw this thing. And apparently hearing its howl, which is I couldn't find anyone describing like what it sounds like, but apparently it's like completely unmistakable for a normal dog or a normal wolf dog, whatever you want to call it. It sounds distinct. So yeah, like apparently, yeah, its howling is a bad omen. And it's weird because sometimes they say its howl is a bad omen, and then some people say it's like not a malicious creature at all, and that it's good.
Well, here's one thing that most urban legends don't have, and even most cryptids don't have, is there's essentially confirmed kills.
Yeah,
that have been attributed to it.
With this one, yeah, there's literally like attacks.
At least 4 deaths attributed to it.
Okay.
Each one, funny enough. So I guess it would go to the theory of it being a hellhound. Is all 4 deaths happen at churches? 2 at 2 churches that are both churches in England, and I don't think they were necessarily close to each other.
Yeah, I'm not sure the distance between them, but yeah, apparently both of those attacks happened the same night, I believe. I think it was literally the same day. So this was a whole incident. This is like a whole big thing back then. So it was it's called Blythburgh Church, I hope I'm saying that right, in Suffolk, England. And so apparently this dog, Hellhound, whatever, burst through the church doors and literally mauls 2 people to death, a boy and like a man, and apparently something falls in the church, like the steeple, the pointy thing on the top of the church. Apparently it fell through the ceiling of the church, which is like people are thinking is like that's it. The thing carries bad luck along with it, and the thing leaves, and apparently it left burn marks on the door, like when it left, and apparently you can still see them to this day, like in that actual church. And I have pictures of them, so I could probably put that up for people that are on YouTube. Apparently there's evidence that it was this was happening during a storm, and how do I explain it? They said this happened during the storm in the story, and then it was later determined that there was a storm that day. So basically that gives the story more credence. And the burn marks on the door, I've seen the pictures. I don't know. I mean, you could determine whether or not they're fabricated or not, but they look kind of legit. I mean, they look like burn marks, but I don't know why they're shaped the way they are.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting legend, and I don't know how prevalent it is outside of maybe like 4 or 5 different stories, and I don't really know like if there's a consensus on what people believe it is. Is it a hellhound? Is it a ghost dog? Is it some sort of other entity? I think the general consensus is that it's a hellhound.
Yeah, I think most people will say the thing does not have good intentions, but there's been some stories where it would follow people home, like if they're alone, but not to hurt them or anything. Like it would just like in a protect manner.
Them. Yeah.
Yeah, it would follow them home if you were alone and like walking around at night or something like that. And this one lady said she was biking and it was following her, keeping up with her bike as fast as she could go, and it could have easily caught up to her and hurt her if it really wanted to, because it was that fast, but it didn't, and it just kind of followed her until she got home, and then it left. That's just one example, but there's many of those. So there's some reason to believe it's like not, literally a demon dog.
And here's where that gets kind of iffy, because like I alluded to before, ghost dogs are a known phenomenon, and they usually appear black and have like similar features to the black Shuck and hellhounds, and they seem to have different mannerisms. So I don't know if we could really attribute that to being the black Shuck or something else entirely. You know what I mean? Like
those stories, those accounts.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. It could be something entirely different, and they just were both black. What was I saying? Oh yeah. So they said the incident with the church, what the explanation for that was, people were in hysteria because the steeple fell through the roof and they were scared. And they all just collectively imagined and hallucinated a black dog, and then the murders were added on later to the story just to make it sound spookier. That's the explanation that I heard, but that doesn't explain the burn marks though.
Well, what is crazy about the black Shuck, and there are still sightings of it in England. So I know I said like there's only like 4 or 5 stories. That's just what I know of off the top of my head. But I know there are like sightings that don't really have like in-depth stories connected to them. And yeah. I believe like people still see the black Shuck in parts of England, and a lot of times it seems they're near churches. Like,
yeah,
that's a pretty common theme.
That's a curious thing. I wonder why. I mean, maybe that thing literally is a like legitimate hellhound, because I don't know why the thing's always near churches. Again, they didn't that explanation for the church incident. They did not explain the burn marks. They didn't even try. So like, maybe they just they're drawn to churches for some reason, or holy type like areas and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, you know, very, it very well
And if
could
that's
be.
the case, then you could probably say the thing does have ill intentions. Like if
A-
it's, I don't
And
know.
you know, dogs and wolves, wolves a lot of time are like kind of double-edged sword creatures as far as like connection with human beings, because a lot of times we think of them as like protective spirits, and then other
Yeah.
times, and like, you know, we talked about dog man in a previous video, and you know, werewolf culture and all that shit. It's almost like sometimes wolves are like monstrous evil creatures, and then sometimes they're literally like protection, like wards
Yeah.
of protection and
Like
great
literally the
spirits.
complete opposite.
And like, yeah, like it's kind of crazy how that works. And you know, that kind of is with dog, like, you know, wolves are canines and so are dogs, and dogs are man's best friend and protectors. And like most of the time when you think dogs and spirits, like it's mostly positive connotations typically.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of true. Usually it's not a negative thing when you hear about uh you know, canines being like dead or ghostly or something like that. The
And
black shook is kind of an exception.
I guess like the color has something to do with that too, you know.
Yeah, well, I don't know if like just ghostly canines are always like black. I didn't look into that, so I'm not sure, but I would imagine they are not always just like black like every single time. People were saying that the black shook was just a really big Irish wolfhound. Do you know what those dogs look like?
I do not.
So they're one of the biggest dogs in the world, and they have really shaggy fur. Uh, like it's kind of just all over the place, and they're really big. So the people think it was a black version of those. I can put a picture of one. Uh, but that doesn't explain the red eyes, you know?
Yeah, and the fact that it caused burn marks, and really most of the accounts uh
Yeah.
have similars. And you know, there are black dogs, but I mean, you'd be able to tell whether you were seeing a fucking Labrador, you know, like.
Yeah, I mean, the size alone, they say it was bigger than the biggest dog you've ever seen. Like, what I would say the biggest dog is probably a Great Dane or something. Like,
Or
bigger than that.
Mastiff maybe, or you know, I mean, there
Yeah,
are
yeah.
some pretty big dogs.
There is, yeah. But it's like, people say it's closer to that of a horse than a dog in terms of size and height.
Yeah, I've heard of that. I've heard that.
Yeah, so that is, I think that's kind of unmistakable. Like, that's such a big height difference that I don't think you would mistake that for a normal dog, normal canine.
I mean, ghost dogs in general are kind of somewhat mainstream culture. Like, I remember my first run-in with like hearing about ghost dogs was literally a point and click Nancy Drew game on the computer. So
I haven't heard much about, like, I've heard of the phenomenon, but I haven't heard of like actual descriptions though. So I have no idea what they actually you typically look like or anything.
from what I
Assuming that these
understand, they're
people
just
actually saw
like
them.
black dogs. And I think it, you know, if you look it up and you look at accounts, sometimes they look kind of like wolves, sometimes they look like your typical like dog with, you know, floppy ears and just black. You know, it kind of varies.
Right. I assume it, as you'd assume it would. There's no reason that, you know, they would all be black, right? That's why I think the black shook's like something entirely different.
Yeah, and I want to say this before we wrap this up. I'm not sure when we're planning on, but there is a gentleman that goes by the name Mark Norman, or there's a gentleman named Mark Norman who is a folklore researcher, and he has written multiple books about the Black Shook. He's pretty much dedicated years of his life to studying it. And, he's a folklore researcher, and that was his his specific discipline, or the specific creature that he kind of delved into. So if
Right.
you want more information, he's pretty much the guy that wrote the book on the Black Shuck. So definitely search his name and check out his books and his podcast and stuff he does if you're interested, because he'll be able to go in depth and explain the lore extremely detailed. This is just kind of a
An overview.
generalized
Yeah,
overview.
I'm sure he'll go into way more detail if you're interested in that, in learning more and that kind of thing. So yeah.
But so what do you make of this? Do you think what people saw was real, or
I don't know if the church thing was real. There is the burn marks, but I definitely think they saw they weren't seeing just some normal ass dog. It wasn't just a black Irish wolfhound. I don't believe that personally. I think they
I don't
definitely
think
saw
you'd be
something
able
else.
to make that mistake, honestly.
I don't think so either.
Especially they've probably seen, if you're in England, you've probably seen that type of dog before, so you're not going to fucking mistake it. You're not going to mistake it.
Right.
That I don't even know a good comparison. Dog breeds are pretty varied and usually very distinct. So
yeah,
that'd be like me saying a pug looks like a chihuahua or something. It's a pug. You can clearly see it's a pug.
Right.
There's nothing you can mistake that with.
Right. Maybe if it was dark out, but even then, I don't know. Probably not. Yeah, that's kind of my view on that. Well, guys, this was Lucid Rain. This was also Cryptid Central. Hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you guys next time.
Peace.
Peace.